People who get locked into a vision. All right, that's it, man. That's their drive. That's their passion. Critics don't matter. This don't matter. They're going to do whatever it fucking takes to be the best at what they do.
And this is Dave Tate again with another edition of Table Talk. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on one question that I was asked a couple weeks ago on Instagram, and I don't know the person's name or handle because of the way that I printed this off, but I told him that I was going to answer it on my IGTV and then never got around to doing it. So figured if I do it this way, it's good content. I can expand on it a little bit more than I would have on IGTV, and I think it's going to apply to more people and it will have a bigger reach from that standpoint. So the question was in regards to when I used to work as a personal trainer. And the question was, when you train Gen Pop, what kind of programming and psychology did you use with them? I'm trying to figure out a more clear way to ask the psychology question. What questions would you ask? How would you choose their exercises? Based on what you have asked or what you did, what movements would be the right to do? So that may have actually even came in as a AMA question, but involves a little more depth than just saying, ask these questions during a health history and so forth. So that's what I'm going to do today and kind of keep the focus just on that. So to provide a little bit of context into my history in the personal training sphere, I actually, while I was still in high school, which is going way back, graduated high school in '86. That's about the only year that I can actually remember very well from career standpoints and so forth. But I worked as a fitness instructor for, I believe it was called Finley Health and Racket Club at the time. And essentially this was just showing people how to use the machines and how to lift weights. And I already had 3 years experience. So, back then I knew all the Weider principles. So I was more than qualified in my mind. Actually, I was an expert in my mind. I knew everything. So from that standpoint, I wouldn't say it was called personal training because I don't even know, at least from where I'm from, if that term even existed or if people even paid for such a service. This just kind of came with the membership. They would sign up and then we would put them on a basic program and then I would supervise the program, not as you see trainers today, supervise it as far as show them the exercises, then after they're set up and they know how to use everything, walk the floor and make sure they're not doing anything to actually kill themselves or hurt themselves. So that was my introduction into personal training, which was probably around 84, 85. And then after high school, there was a very small stint of working as a strength coach per se. Again, it was more of the guy that coaches the weights for my high school over the summer while I was working in a factory. So I was buying time until going to college, and my parents were big on work. So, and they wanted me to spend some time working in one of the local factories. So I had an idea of, what that type of lifestyle was like if that was a path that I was going to choose, which was a large part of my town and a large part of the people that I graduated with, the path that they chose. So during that time, I would train the football players and then go and work. So that was a small period of time, but it was 3 months. But there's a history that's building here. From there, going on to college, there's a small stint in a YMCA, which was in Tiffin, Ohio, I believe. And then on to Bowling Green State University, where I was a manager of Hard Bodies Gym, which expanded from Toledo into Bowling Green at the time. So part of that time period there, and there were several years of that, involved, you know, the management aspects of basically running a gym, and the same thing I was doing before at the other club, is bringing people in, setting them up on training programs, showing them how to do the exercises, and helping them with that. So there's always been Gen Pop, you know, up until that time. So it was only through when I was in Bowling Green where I started to work with or train with athletes that were, and bodybuilders that were above, you know, your general population that you typically see, but that was still kind of far and few. The high school kids were not really Gen Pop either, but they were still they're still super beginners. So, and you got to look at, I can use Gen Pop, and I'm going to use that because that's what people typically relate to when you're talking about general population. But I'm talking about training ages of under 3 years. So actually under a year. As I moved on, things changed a little bit more. Once I got graduated from there was a couple year break where I probably wasn't training anybody except for the group of people that I was powerlifting with. Then graduated from the University of Toledo, came to Columbus for several reasons. One of the biggest, to be at Westside Barbell and to learn from Louis Simmons. So I had to find a job, you know, so ended up at the Capital Club, which is what it was known at the time, which was a corporate or executive health club, I guess. The way I like to explain it is it was a country club without a golf course. So it had the dining and it had the weight training. I ended up working there for 8 years, maybe even a little bit more than that. And that's where the bulk of my learning how to train the general population came in, because this was a different population than what I was used to. It was not so much an older population, but it was a population that had a gap in exercise for 5 or more years. So it's a lot of my clientele were lobbyists, attorneys, a couple entrepreneurs, bankers, you know, and that's pretty much it. I mean, it's professionals, I guess, is what the way you would classify it. But training was certainly not high on their priority list. So when they were coming in, they were either coming in because they just realized, hey, this is the time I need to get my shit together. It's been too long, or because they had a physical and their doctor said they're out of shape, or the stress was starting to get to them and they were dealing with, you know, anxiety, panic attacks and stuff like that because of the professions that they were working in. So 8 years of doing that, and 8 years of basically trying to figure out what the best way to train them was going to be. And I think that's where this question lies, and where most people who are working in club settings or even private training settings are running into, is they have these clientele that have a gap. You know, they're a little older, say they're 35 to 45 years of age, no training history except for what they did in high school, maybe some of them in college. So that's my background with that. So probably, I figured the hours up one time. It's crazy. It's like 40, 50, 60,000 hours or something that I've been in a gym. And the majority of that time was with the general population. Some of the things to answer the question here. So I put my history out there so people realize that, yes, I have had Elite FTS for 21 years. even during the 21 years I've still worked with powerlifters, but I've typically worked with powerlifters or consulted with strength coaches and so forth, but haven't really done anything with the general population. So what I'm going to talk about is what I did with the general population. And I seriously doubt that the human anatomy and physiology and biomechanics and all that has changed and evolved over 20 years. You take somebody who's in complete total shit shape, which, I got a scale of shit, suck, good, great. So you take somebody who's at the shit phase, and all you want to do is to get them from the shit phase to the suck phase. There's I don't want to say it's a very simple process, but a lot of people overcomplicate it, because anything's really going to work, but a lot of things can also get them hurt because they are very deconditioned. So to jump right off with that is, and the other thing I should note is I had a waiting list for it took me 2 years to build up. It took me a year to build up the clientele to where I had 40 billable hours a week. It took me another year to have 50 billable hours a week and then a waiting list. So, and that went on. Part of the reason why I left doing that, even though I did love what I did, there's no doubt about that, I didn't have any time. So, one of the biggest reasons why entrepreneurs start businesses isn't because of money, it's because of freedom of time. So I wanted to have the freedom of time because I couldn't see raising a family and leaving the house at 4:30 in the morning for a 5 a.m. Training session, and then getting home at 10 o'clock at night, with the weekends off. And that took me a long time to get the weekends off. So that's where I was there. So what I was doing was working. What I was doing was very, very low injury rate, if not zero injury rate. I made a lot of mistakes the first 6 months to a year trying to apply principles that were far beyond what the clientele actually needed. So what I'm going to get into and what I'm going to talk about is what worked. I'm not going to talk about all the misfortunes, all the mistakes, because there were a ton of them that I made with, the sales and all the other kind of stuff. These are the things that worked. And some of these things, if you work for a club or you work for somebody else, you need to discuss it with them, because you still have to fit whatever you're doing within what their general guidelines are, because you don't own the place. And trust me, you don't want to, because that's a whole nother, unless you want to run a business, you don't. If you want to train people, you want to train people. If you want to run a business, then you want to own the place. So the first thing is the health history. Actually, the first thing even starts before that. The first thing is the first time that the person walks into the club, they have to feel comfortable and they have to be congratulated, because that's a very hard thing to do that a lot of us take for granted because we've done this for our whole life. So we love this. The first time they walk into a club, they are intimidated. They don't know what they're looking. They have no idea what they're doing. They're walking into a completely foreign, strange environment. So just put yourself in the same situation to where you're going to walk into a place that you've never been into before, that you don't know anybody there, and you have to be there because some doctor or somebody told you that you had to be there. So they are very uncomfortable as they walk in. And the first thing that typically happens is they get jumped on by a salesperson, or if they've already signed up, they get jumped on by, a personal trainer or fitness instructor that's going to take 20, 30 minutes explaining to them exactly how out of fucking shape they are, which is one of the things that I fought really hard to change when I was there, because I wasn't part of the sales process of the membership. I was part of the sales process of the personal training. And I'm not going to talk about that, but I'm just going to talk about the actual training aspect. But the health history was usually one of the first things. It was our first contact with the members after they joined. And it was, hey, can you take them and, run them through the health history and run them through the fitness exam. And our first fitness exam was thorough. You had to have a degree where I work, so it wasn't like they were hiring any slapdick off of the street. So but even with that, the health history was 20 minutes of basically asking them every question that they've already been asked a million times before, and just reinforcing just how out of shape they were. And then you would finish that off with a body fat test showing them how fat they were. It was just, to me, there were reasons for all of it. I get that, but it's the right thing, but at the wrong time. So I changed it to just having them walk on a treadmill or having them ride a bike for a couple minutes while I asked them some of the more important questions on the health history that were medically related. What medications are you on? What physical limitations? Anything that you would need to know that were red flags that were going to cause issues within the training program. So that covered the bases there. I could tell within 2 minutes of them walking on the treadmill if they were really, really, really out of shape or if they were in decent shape. And I'm not telling you that you're killing them on the treadmill. It's just a normal walk on the treadmill where you're asking them questions. That, for me, I can tell by looking at them basically where their body fat is within a striking distance, 5% plus or minus, which is irrelevant. Their weight, I really didn't care about that. That was one thing I wanted to try to get them away from thinking in the first place. So I spent that time trying to determine, what type of training program that they would go on, because we would still give them their basic introduction training programs, how to use the machines and how to use the equipment. So we still do that and then make the recommendations based upon that. So there were some people based upon physical restrictions that, the cardio was going to start lower, the weight training may not come in right away, it may come in later. Other people where the weight training may come in, a little heavier, and vice versa. I'm not going to go down that road. Anybody that's certified as a personal trainer kind of understands that. But through that health history, just to throw it out as a quick sales tool, is with every question, and as I'm trying to develop the rapport with them, I am trying to find out what their commitment level is, if their spouse, is supportive, or their significant other is supportive, what time they're generally going to come in, and the money aspect. That people from a sales perspective can really only give you an objection because of time, commitment, spouse, or money. So I wanted to cover those, at least in my own notes. So if I was to bring them on as a training client, I would know what the objections were and what the objections I would have to overcome over the next couple of weeks were going to be. Now, let's say this is a done deal. They're signed up. They're now a client of mine. Most clients are all going to fall in my demographic at the time. Most clients all kind of fell in the same group, as far as where they were as conditioning wise. I had some outliers, but they were rare. I mean, it's like 20% of all my clients were outliers. The other 80% could be trained pretty much exactly the same way, taking their restrictions, into consideration. So after they signed up, and after they signed up as a client, the first thing that I would do is to go back over the restrictions. So a lot of times, I would say 50% of the time or more, meant there was a conversation that I had to have with their doctor's nurse. I kind of gave up on trying to get a hold of the doctor. That may be different today because that was 20 some years ago, but the nurses would tell me everything I needed to know. And now they're not giving you their medical history. They can't do that, but they can answer questions from a yes or no perspective in regards to orthopedic conditions and so forth. And if somebody had a lower back issue or a knee issue or some type of issue that was beyond my scope of practice, they were given a referral, and then that body part was pretty much taken out of the program, or anything that hurt that body part or even put it into any type of stressful position for that body part was completely eliminated from the program. That's not my job. That's the job of a physical therapist. And nutrition was the same way. So if the body fat was higher, they wanted to lose weight or whatever it was, referral was made to a registered dietitian that I had a connection with, and that's where that ended. So I would take the body fat once they were comfortable. I need to stress that. I may not take body fat on somebody for 2 months after training them. Once they were comfortable, then I would take their body fat. It wasn't something that I did from the very beginning because I wanted them to be more keen to what they look like and how they feel instead of what they weighed and what their body fat was. The body fat was just a way that it was a tool, it was a measure, it was a metrics that I had to be able to gauge the progress. All that in mind. So now I have a group of people that may have just got trimmed down even more, because if the medical restrictions or the orthopedic restrictions were beyond my scope and out of my control, or something that I hadn't worked with before and didn't have the time to do the research on it, fibromyalgia was one that I referred out to other people until it became 5 or 6 referrals out. Then I had to figure out, what can I do? What's the best I can do for this person? But until that time came, I just referred them out. You can't pretend to be what you're not. And that's one of the things that when I had the training staff underneath me that I was managing, that was one of the biggest things that I tried to harp on, is never pretend to be what you're not. So if you're not a registered dietitian, then stop fucking trying to write diets for people. Not only is it, illegal to do, it's not within your scope to do. And you're going to see how this actually played into my advantage. Once a couple years had passed and I had tried conjugate training, I tried linear training, I tried basic bodybuilding training, I tried upper body split, lower body split, functional training, any freaking type of training. I went to more seminars in 2 years than probably anybody has ever, and tried everything, and nothing was jiving, nothing was working, nothing was making a connection that was getting the clients the progress that I wanted to see them make, and letting them have the experience in the gym that I knew that if someday I left, they would still continue to use the gym for health reasons, which is what essentially a personal trainer is you're a migration tool, I guess, is what you are. You're the person to help introduce them to the environment, show them how to use the environment, show them how to, vet out what's good training, what's bad training, and then basically let them go. And then so they can do it on their own. That way they don't become dependent on somebody for every training session that they have, because if that person leaves, then they stop exercising even though they know full well what they're supposed to do. That's why I'm a big fan of trainers trying to build their clientele so they have a waiting list, because it should be an honor. You should feel very good to be able to tell somebody, I think you're cool enough to go on your own, or just I'll see you once every couple of weeks. And then you can still fill your billable hours with, the next person that's on the list down. What I did that worked the best for me is I created 4 different groups or 4 different categories of clients, 4 different ranks. So in powerlifting, you got, class 5, class 4, class 3, class 2, class 1, masters, and elite. And then there's the pro totals. So you have all these different totals, that show that you're moving up and you're becoming better. I wanted to have the same type of thing. So I spent a week or so going through my ACSM materials from the certification that I had there, through my NSCA materials from the certification I had there, the ISSA, ACE. I looked for every chart I could find, and some of this crap was online at the time, but we're going back a long time ago to where most of these organizations didn't even have websites at the time. So I found every chart that I could possibly find that had some type of ranking system. So most of them were all fitness test related, including there was one for bench press, push-ups, pull-ups, squatting, a 1 mile walk, 1.5 mile walk, 2 mile walk, different types of walking on the treadmill or, regular surface. I found one for leg raises. I found one for body fat. I found one for sit-ups. I found one for sit and reach. I took as many of those as I could that covered all fitness realms. So I had couple that would cover flexibility, a couple strength, a couple endurance, a couple anaerobic threshold. So I, instead of endurance, let's say aerobic capacity and anaerobic capacity. Some of that would just be fun to do, and body weight movements and weight training movements. Then I rank those. So I put those into a hierarchy. So if you were in the top 25% of the chart that was for pull-ups, well, then you were a leopard, or if you were in the rank underneath that, the 50 to 75%, you were a jaguar. And then under that would be a lion. Then in the very beginning was a tiger. So each one of these things, so say bench press, somebody could be a tiger, where the push-ups, they could be ranked as a lion, the jaguar, or the pull-ups, they'd be ranked as a tiger. I used a box squat instead of a regular squat, say they're ranked as a tiger. 1.5 mile walk, they're ranked as a tiger. So I'm taking them through, and these become the movements that I'm training to make better. So that a lot of these become the training exercises that I'm using to actually progress them, because they all had a card, and on the card, was circled, where their records were for each one of these. So for them to move from a tiger, which was the lowest, to a lion, they had to have 80% of all the test move up to that next category. And then when they would move from a tiger to a lion, I'd send a card home and, congratulatory. And, you make it something special for them. Even though it sounds corny, it's a big fucking thing, so it's a big thing for their family to be supporting them too as well. So if they got something that, they can show, their family, their kids and so forth, it's a good thing. But I only moved people when 80% of the variables moved. So you couldn't be half tiger, half lion. That wasn't the way that I did things. 80% had to move. So if 60% was already over there and there was this other 20% that just wasn't there, well, then those were the weak areas we had to spend more time focusing on. So that could have been the anaerobic capacity or the aerobic capacity, which I hated doing aerobic work. So it's typically something I had them do on their own. But if it fell to be in one of those pieces that wasn't moving forward, then this obviously was somebody that I had to stand there for 30, 40 minutes and watch them do their cardio on the treadmill, or, do sled drag. I mean, there's different training variables to be able to move that forward. Everything gets better with strength. So as maximum strength goes up, everything kind of moves up. So if I could increase their maximal strength on their main body weight lifts and then the weight training lifts, I could get everybody out of the tiger phase from cardiovascular and all the other stuff. So the reason why I didn't make it 100% is because there were certain variables that were in there that, say, flexibility or mobility type testing was in there, and it wasn't a lot. It was just a couple things. And that happened to be their shoulders, and their shoulders are fucked up. All right, well, that's not on me. That's on who I referred them to, and are they doing the exercises? Are they doing the work of who I referred them to? Then if it's not moving up, then I know that they either didn't see the person that I referred them to, or the person that I referred them to isn't, making them accountable, or isn't giving a shit enough to make sure that they're making progress. And the other one was body fat. Body fat was not something that I was accountable for. You know, I can't train somebody to a lower body fat percentage if they want to reduce their body fat or their body fat is too high. And you got to remember, you're talking about the general population here. So you're not talking about six packs and shit like that. You're talking about, you know, being healthy, which is a whole different standard, which is why you need to look at the ACSM guidelines and those type of things to see what are healthy body fat levels, you know, and around that way. If that didn't get better, then it was on the registered dietitian that I referred. It wasn't on me. So when it came time to renew or to move forward, this progression of tigers, you know, the progression of cats, the cat progression, was a way to show them that you're getting better and I'm also doing my job. You know, so the areas where you're not getting better, you know, I can give that person a call if you like, or, you know, you can touch base and kind of go from there. So the entire training at that point was based on how to make these tests better. It's the general population, right? So if these are all well-rounded tests and there's 10 different variables in there, they're not going to be doing a whole lot of different exercises. You can be very creative in the weight room. You don't even have to track a whole lot of the shit, because the only thing that you're trying to do is to get all these things better. Because trust me, once I got everybody to a Jaguar category, they were in damn good shape. They were in really good shape. And if they made it to the leopard category, they were in really fucking good shape. And at that point, they could do pretty much, you know, whatever they wanted to do, because they're knocking out 20 pull-ups and, you know, 50 push-ups or whatever it was, you know, for these variables. So what I would suggest for those listening to this, because it has been, you know, 20 years since I put this whole thing together. I'm sure the testing, while the human body hasn't changed, I'm sure the testing metrics are way better. So I had to use things like a sit and a reach test and a sit up. I had to use things that I knew were exercises and movements that I didn't necessarily want to use because of safety reasons. So some of them I did pivot off of, like the sit-ups. I made it hanging leg raises and things of that sort. So I did pivot off of that because it wasn't the best that was out there. So if I was to go back and try to replicate what I was doing here, I would have 4 different categories, lay them out however you want. And so there's a progression for the people to see that they're getting better, you know, everybody. And you need to really work on getting their focus away from the scale and body fat percentage, unless they're a bodybuilder and that's what you're training them for. This is not what we're talking about. As general population, we're talking about getting them healthier and getting them into an exercise routine that they're going to be able to stick with and be able to use for the rest of their life. So the more variety that was able to be introduced into the program, you know, by exercises or whatnot, my clients could go anywhere. If they worked with me for 6 months, they could go anywhere on vacation and still train and still know what to do. It wasn't like they didn't even have to have a set workout in front of them. They knew what they had to do because they knew what variables they were trying to always work to get better. So if I was to replicate it, I would go look and see what tests are out there now through the reputable certification bodies and set it up based upon that. And especially remember that these people I work with coaches a lot. And athletes, weight training is not a priority to them. It's GPP. All right. So when you're dealing with Gen Pop, training is not a priority to them. Work is probably their number one priority most of the time, and then their family. Training is not even on the grid. So you got to find a way to try to get it on the grid. So the only way you can get on the grid is to have success, you know, and if you have 10 different variables and if they only move up from, you know, a tiger to a lion in one variable, that's a big fucking deal. So you celebrate that, because the way I had this set up inherently had hundreds of little wins built into it to be able to take somebody, even if they don't lose a pound or they don't lose any body fat, to take somebody and to get them into a healthier body that they felt better in and felt better about, that's the number one reason why you're a personal trainer. You're not there to make these drastic transformations that you can post online, because that's not the best transformation you can make is the one that never occurs, because you never see it. It's slowly over a period of time, and their lifestyle changes. The transformation kind of denotes, a complete pivot, going from one track to another track. You gotta build this into their current lifestyle, so it's something that's manageable and for them to do for the long term. So you guys can hit me up with any questions on this in the comment section and DM me on Instagram. I can give you more information. It's kind of cut and dry. It's not that complicated. It's just a matter of, leaving your ego at the door, always making the client's priorities first, and finding ways to have the little wins and trying to move every fitness component forward without complicating things. Because you are their go-between between what they see online and what they read in magazines or whatever it's going to be. You're the person that they're going to ask. So you need to stay educated as well to be able to give them a responsible answer instead of just saying, oh, that's bullshit and stuff like that. So for this question, this is Dave Tate. I want to thank you again. Table Talk out.